everybody, and welcome back to another Captain's Academy episode with your instructor Chase. And today's episode is going to talk about this new reticule that we got not too long ago. So a lot of you probably are looking at the horizontal axis where the green arrow just pointed, and you probably were wondering, what do all those little lines mean and what does that number mean? Well, I've got an answer for all of you. I've also sort of got an answer for you for what these vertical ones mean as well. However, the horizontal one is often the one that is most important because that's the one you use most frequently when trying to lead shots. If you look at your reticule closely enough, you've probably noticed that there are little sort of increments in numbers from 0 to 5 to 10, 15, 20, and so on from the center of your screen all the way to the outside edges. And what these numbers mean and all the little markers on the actual reticule, what they indicate is the flight time out to target if the target is a battleship-sized target moving at approximately 20 knots. So if you lead correctly, meaning you look at your shell flight time and you see, let's say, 5 seconds, and there's a ship out in the distance, say a battleship that's moving at 20 knots, so like a lot of the lower tier US battleships, if you put the reticule and you lead it by 5 blocks and you fire, you're most likely going to hit that battleship. If you run into a faster battleship, for example a Tirpitz, which is moving at let's say 30 knots, then you have to increase your lead time by 1.5 because you're firing at a ship that's moving 1.5 times faster. So let's say your shell flight time was 10 seconds to target. Well, now you need to put it approximately at 15 seconds, and this is usually for long-range shooting. If you're at a closer distance, let's say your shell flight time is 5 seconds and you're dealing with the Tirpitz, then what you need to do is shift it over by about 1.5 times what 5 seconds would be, which is about 7.5. So you're going from leading at where the red arrow is to leading to where the green arrow is at that little vertical line on the reticule. Anyways, that's pretty much all I can explain with just this picture. Let me show you how this applies in the actual game when you're shooting at actual ships. So first up, I'm going to be shooting at an Arkansas Beta, which moves at a top speed of 20.5 knots. So if you take a look at the shell flight time, pointed by the green arrow, it shows 7.03 or 6.88 seconds, somewhere near 7 seconds. If you take a look at where the red arrow is pointing, that's the 7-second mark. So I've got it at the front of the ship, and I fire, and I hit shells sort of near the rear. The reason the shots are hitting a little bit further back is because the 7-second point, which I was aiming with, was a little bit behind where the bow of the ship was. Had I had the actual 7-second point right at where the bow is, the shots would land right in the center. So as you can tell, this salvo, again, it was a little bit further back, and I hit a little bit further back on the ship. On this particular salvo here, take a look at where the aim point is, 6.88 seconds. I've got it pretty close to where the bow of the ship would be. And take a look at where my shells end up going. They're pretty much going to land smack bang in the middle of the ship. By the way, I mean, when I said battleship-sized target, that's also important because this rule works really well for battleships, heavy cruisers, things that are battleship-sized. Against destroyers, you require a little bit more lead because destroyers are such a small ship that if you follow this exact rule of leading where the bow is, you're going to miss your target completely. Now, moving on to the Tirpitz, which sails at approximately 1.5 times speed of the Ark Beta, and you see the rule in effect here. 6.88 second shell travel time, much like that last clip, and I lead it by approximately 1.5 times, which is around 10 seconds. And you'll see that the first salvo, which when I was leading it, I put it just a little bit behind the bow when I fired, the shots landed a little bit further back of the middle. The next shot, I make the adjustment. I put the roughly 10-second marker at the bow of the ship. I fire. And this salvo is going to land smack dab in the middle. And as long as you're able to run into an enemy ship that's giving you a broadside and you follow these rules, and the ship is a larger ship like a cruiser or a battleship, then you should be able to hit them squarely in the center every single time you fire. However, this rule does not work perfectly when you're dealing with destroyers because destroyers are substantially smaller than battleships. So here I was firing against a Błyskawica, which has a top speed of 39 knots, which is almost double what you would get at 20 knots, right? So I was thinking if you just let it by 2 times the shell flight time, you should be able to hit a destroyer. But what I kept finding was that when I did it, it would either miss or hit at the very, very end of the ship. And the reason this happens is because destroyers are substantially smaller than battleships. There's a lot less of the ship for you to be able to hit. Plus, if you use the rule for battleships, what you're going to find is that your shots are always going to land into the ocean because that's where the battleship would have been, but the destroyer would have already passed that point. To explain this even better, take a look at this picture. So assuming that I found a Tirpitz that goes 39 knots, the same as a Błyskawica, and the shell flight time is the same at around 3.3 seconds, if I doubled that, because the ship is moving at 39 knots, we're talking about a shell flight time around 6.5, 7 seconds. Let's say that's the number. Take a look at the bow of the battleship. If I put that at 7 seconds and I fire, and the battleship is moving at 39 knots, I will hit smack bang in the middle of the battleship. But take a look at where the bow of the destroyer is. The destroyer's bow is all the way out to about where 12.5 seconds would be. The difference between the two aim points is quite literally the size of the ships. So when you are shooting at a destroyer, try to picture in your mind's eye that you're shooting at a battleship that's moving at the speed of the destroyer, and to put the reticule where the bow of the battleship would be, but not where the bow of the destroyer would be. Now let's take a look at this again, this last shot here. According to the last picture, if I was to hit the destroyer squarely in the middle, I had to lead at about 12.5 on the reticule. On this particular shot, what you end up seeing is I fire exactly when destroyer passes around 11. And you'll see what ends up happening to my shot is that when I fire, my shots still end up hitting the destroyer further back. Had I actually led and tried to aim right at 12.5, I would have hit and killed the destroyer by hitting it squarely in the middle. One final thing that I'm going to talk about is those horizontal lines on the vertical axis, the ones pointed out by the green arrow here. What do those lines mean? Well, I've got a guess, and that's the best I can provide you because I don't know the exact values. But what I think those horizontal lines on the vertical axis are for is a measure of distance, whether that be closure or somebody running away from you. And so you use those ones primarily when a ship is at an angle coming towards you, an angle going away from you, coming directly towards you, or running away in a straight line. And so the best way to explain this is to show it to you in the actual game. So take a look at this Tirpitz that's coming directly towards me. So my estimate is that in the, let's say around 8 seconds or so that the shells are going to take to travel the distance, that most likely the Tirpitz would have come closer by, let's say, 500 meters. So what you'll see me do is give it about 1 tick on that vertical axis from the bow, and I'm going to fire these shots, and they're going to land squarely in the middle of the Tirpitz. And again, you have to make adjustments for the speed of the ship. If you're firing against a really fast heavy cruiser, you're going to give it a little bit more. If it's against a destroyer, even more. Against slower battleships, a little bit less. Now, weirdly enough, when a ship is going away from you, it looks like you have to give it substantially more lead on the vertical axis. So here we go. See a Tirpitz again, and if you look on the vertical axis, it looks like I'm giving it like 4 or 5 little ticks, and it's not. Because what I'm focusing on is where the bow of the Tirpitz would be, which is roughly where the 0 is, and I'm giving it 1 tick lead as it's going away from me from where the bow of the ship is. And if I do this correctly, you will see my shots land squarely in the middle, which is where the superstructure is. So you're probably going to ask, well, if the horizontal lead is so easy to get and the vertical lead is so easy to get when ships are sailing either horizontally or vertically, then where's the challenge? Well, the challenge is when you have ships that sail sort of like this, where it's at an angle and it's not directly towards you and it's not perfectly horizontal. Then what you have to do is sort of start to figure out how much vertical lead that you have to give, and then how much you have to adjust the horizontal lead by. And that really is going to come down to playing the game a lot, figuring it out, and actually gaining this through experience. I've given you the basics, and hopefully this will help you improve your aim. One more thing, of course, is if this video does help you and you happen to see Tsundere Admiral in game, do make sure to give him a shout, as he was basically my glutton for punishment for quite a few hours last night. Anyways, folks, hopefully this video has helped you in terms of your aim and figuring out what your reticule is all about. If it does, do let me know in the comment section below. Of course, if you have other comments or questions, also leave those in the comment section below. Anyways, I've got to take off, so I hope you all have a good day. Take care, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.